Assalamu alaikum. I'm Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. I wanted to bring my love and joy and support to Islamic Relief during this Ramadan season. Ramadan Mubarak to all of you.
Let us salute Islamic Relief USA for living up to the calling of this holy month, helping local organizations, providing food security, health care, and financial assistance to struggling communities and resettled refugees.
Our Muslim American community has been on the front lines in Florida's 9th Congressional District and other areas of the nation to help us recover.
I'm grateful for all the work they are doing in my district and around the world.
Islamic Relief USA is constantly working together for a better world.
Your charitable efforts to help reduce hunger, educate refugees, and assist survivors of domestic abuse embody the noble values that are honored in Ramadan.
Your work to put the Muslim values of community and charity into action has helped not only provide food, but also healthcare, financial assistance, and many more hit hardest by this pandemic.
Islamic Relief USA and the Muslim American community in my district have lived those values to the fullest these last 2 years.
Thank you to Islamic Relief USA for the work you do to lift the voices of Muslims all around the world.
As we continue to fight for a more just and more tolerant world, I am honored to be your partner in Congress.
It's this community care that binds us as a global human family.
We are better for all that you have contributed and the difference that you make.
I wish you and all of my Muslim brothers and sisters a blessed month of peace and spiritual renewal.
May peace and love be brought upon you. Ramadan Mubarak.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Miles, host of the SOS, the Shoutout Show. You are in the right place. This is the continuation, day 11. That's right, brothers and sisters, of the Ramadan 30 for 30. Now, I have to tell you that I had to pre-record this because I'm trying to catch a flight. I have to work out in the great state of Ohio, OHIO. Shout out to University of Cincinnati. I'm on my way. But I felt though I want to make sure we keep this thing going. We stay with our tradition of making sure we have a representation of every day for the month of Ramadan. We are the original Ramadan 30 for 30, brothers and sisters. Think about that. So the topic today, as we enter into, this is Ramadan day number 11. And this next expansive days, you're going to start getting a lot of emails and people asking you, for your forgiveness, and you're going to email those people about forgive me and things like that. And, I'm just trying to put it out there. It's supposed to be extremely transformational, but in a lot of regards, let's be honest, sometimes it's really transactional, because the idea of picking a month or picking a week out of a month to tell everybody you're sorry, it has its place. I'm not going to make any comments in terms of the religious impotence of this, but you had a whole year. That's the way I think. You had a whole year. This is 10 days out of 356 days. So you had another 346 days to get to this point in reality. And we should always be cognizant about the aspect of forgiveness, because forgiveness really means that we hurt somebody, that somebody has been introduced to the pain game. And it's because of us, something we said, something we did, something we didn't do, how we represented ourselves or misrepresented ourselves. The scope of forgiveness for me and a lot of other people, I forgive, but I have my aspect. I have my tendencies where I don't forgive all the way. That you have to show me something before I forgive completely. Now, that's just me speaking on myself, my shortcomings and all those type of things. Because at times, brothers and sisters, let's be honest, we do make forgiveness about us and not about the person who's asking for forgiveness and asking to please give me another chance. I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I don't know what I was doing. I was out of my mind. Shake out of my mind. We heard all of it. But my point is, this very, very solitude act literally is the crucible of society being successful and not being successful. That as a society, can we forgive things? But as individuals, can we forgive things within the same context of the society? There are things that are out there in the world that are unconscionable. And it doesn't matter we forgive them or not. They are unconscionable. They are in the public purview. We can see them. Some of them are open. Some of them are closed. We go through. It's almost like a catalog. I'm reading on ESPN today, and they talk about a sexual scandal at Penn State. And I'm thinking Jerry Sandusky. They're like, no, it was one before that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Because we are not narrators of human behavior. We don't know. And clearly, not knowing says that forgiveness comes from above. Comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for today, brothers and sisters, we're going to ask the question, are you ready to forgive? I'm asking you. I'm also asking myself, are you ready to forgive? Because sometimes we are and sometimes we aren't. But we're going to talk about the aspect in that space in between, because some people say, oh, forgive, you got to move on, you got to forgive and forget. Well, we got a whole medical profession of mental health that says that sometimes it's hard to just move on and forgive and forget. You definitely can't forgive. I mean, you can forgive, but you definitely can't forget, because we are creatures of memory. This is how we learn. This is how we retain things. This is how we acquire things about our space and our understanding of life and existence. We acquire it, of course, through memory. And so when someone puts out a negative memory, or someone commits an injustice against you, they do you wrong or they do you dirty, we be a fool to think that it doesn't register in our memory. The question now is, how do we get it out of our memory? How do we kind of move it over to the side? We can forgive a lot of things, but there's always a little residue there. There's always a little side eye. Little side eyes, like, I don't know about that. I don't know about him or her. And that's natural. This is not me being fully committed to the forgiveness, because there are layers to the game in forgiveness. And we're going to talk about it here in the Shout Out Show. Preacher Mars, stay tuned.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
All right. So as a part of this being pre-recorded, we won't be able to have people come in on the chat while I'm doing it, but I'm sure they can come in when we're running it. I think Sultana will be running it back just to make sure everything is cool. If not, put up your comments anyway. So I want to give a shout out to our regular crew. I want to give a shout out to Sister Ree. Shout out to you, Brother Derek, and as well, Brother Juwan. I want to give a shout out to Altaf Rashid, my main man, 6 o'clock, straight up, straight down, a Canadian ambassador to the show, who tunes in from Toronto, Canada. He makes sure the quality of the show is good on this side of the border and that side of the border as well. We'll give a shout out, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi to everybody, but definitely assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh to Altaf, Ree, and of course, Brother Johnny L. Thomas, better known as JT, my little brother. I hope everything is going well with your fast and your family is blessed. Also want to give a shout out to Brother Bilal Salahuddin and Sister Sonia Salahuddin, who are regulars on the show. They are shout out supporters, part of our family. Shout out Soul Family, shout out Show Soldiers. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. Also want to give a shout out to Brother Eric Carter. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope everybody's fast is going well. Shout out to my main man, Mark Kennedy, Jelani Locks. Hope you're doing well and your recovery is full and meaningful. I appreciate you putting out that work. Also want to give a shout out, of course, to Maxine B. Cade, who is the proprietor of BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Go to that website and check it out. I want to give a shout out also to Miss Eleanor want to give a shout out to Mary Moss, better known as Mama San, who comes on here and sparks the conversation. Also, want to give a shout out to my main man, Elijah Salahuddin, better known as Fight the Power. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. So let me get into my space here. Let me get into my space. You see, the idea of forgiveness is a divine idea. The problem is you're taking a divine idea, a divine concept, and you're putting it into the hands of flawed individuals. We are flawed creatures. And sometimes we're asking ourselves to do the divine, and we know we don't have it. That when people ask for our forgiveness, we know we can't fully give it to them. We can't even articulate why we can't fully give it to them. You can give them some. Because sometimes before you give any forgiveness, you have to have a full understanding. I need to know why X, Y, and Z happened. You want my forgiveness. You want transparency. I need you to tell me what happened in this situation. Why you didn't show up. What happened here? What's missing? Why you didn't do X, Y, and Z? And it's not an inquisition, but it has to lay a groundwork because we're so quick to, I forgive you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm not saying you don't, but you have to understand your behavior that led you to this position where you have to ask for forgiveness from another person. Now, asking for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is totally different. You're talking to a supreme entity. He has no flaws. He has no mistakes. He knows the beginning and the end. He knows the seen and the unseen. Al-Ghaib. He knows these things. So when he speaks to you, he speaks to your heart. And he can see in your heart. Therefore, you ain't out there trying to come up with a couple yarns or some fly narratives. He sees your heart. If you're a criminal, you're a criminal. If you're an addict, you're an addict. If you're a liar, you're a liar. If you're a freak, you're a freak. Allah knows. That's what I'm telling you. And so when you go to that type of forgiveness, it's different. Because you know when you go to that type of forgiveness, there's usually nobody there. You just praying and ain't nobody there. You don't have to be complicit with what anybody else thinks. But when dealing with a human being, brothers and sisters, let's be honest. Flawed individuals understand flawed individuals. And between two flawed individuals, you can get oftentimes something that's divine put into the hands of flawed people who think that it is divine. And one of my great teachers said, hey, listen, before you apologize to a person, ask forgiveness to Allah for what you did to that person, and then say, well, number one, I asked forgiveness for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what I did. Now I'm asking you. And I said, why did you do that? And he said, one of the reasons he found it extremely important, brothers and sisters, is because there has to be another voice, if you will, in a situation. That spirit, as spiritual people, you need somebody to co-sign on that forgiveness letter. You hear what I'm saying? You need somebody to co-sign on the forgiveness letter. You can't sign both lines. You hear what I'm saying? You can't sign both lines. There's literally three lines. One for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one for you, and one for the person that you wrong. You can't sign these two. And even though you sign it, just like a loan doesn't mean that your loan is going to be approved. All you can do is hope, and it leads you back to the space that you have to continue to pray for that forgiveness. See, what I learned is that you don't pray for forgiveness one time. You don't ask one time. You pray continuously. So when you don't even see that person, you are sending those blessings that way so that their heart can be lightened and not be tied into a situation where they're constantly going over their shoulders or going back in their memory going, man, that person did me wrong. Preacher was pretty bad at that point. Or Joe, I can't believe Joe like that. Or Marjorie, I didn't even see that in Marjorie. That's the way our lives work as human beings. And here's the other thing too. I'm guilty of this. When you give forgiveness, or even more so when you ask for forgiveness, it can't be on your own terms. You need a mediator. For Muslims, Christians, that mediator is God. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need a mediator that helps you dispel of all the BS and get to your true selves. You know, when I went to Alcoholics Anonymous meeting years ago with a friend of mine, and he had told me some things about his struggle, but they told him, you got to be in this space. It's a safe space. And the things he told me was shocking because I was right there with him. I didn't know all this stuff was going on. but I saw him just spill it out of himself. And what he was doing was getting all that stuff out because he needed to learn how to forgive himself. That's another aspect. But when we give forgiveness, brothers and sisters, listen, give it without expectation. Give without expectation. Have hopes, but give without expectations. Because when you give forgiveness with expectations, you are immediately looking for a return on their behavior. You're immediately looking for something. And it usurps the fact that that person is not completely in a space where they can give it to you. The forgiveness is acknowledgement that something is wrong, that something is broken and requires a solution or a fix. We're going to be right back. I want you guys to check this out because I thought this was pretty interesting. This is Tony Robbins, How to Forgive. Now, some of it is flaky. It's kind of, pop culturist, but there's some things in there I think you guys will enjoy. Check it out.
Have you ever been stuck? Have you ever been in a place where you were frustrated, you're angry, or sad, or you're worried, or you're stressed, and you just couldn't get yourself out of it? Usually that happens because there's a lack of forgiveness. What would happen if you just let go? And most of the challenges we have in our life are because we have unmet expectations. Listen, have you ever snapped at somebody unfairly and felt bad about it afterwards? It had nothing to do with them. It was just the state of stress you're in. It's not an excuse, but you understand. Well, then have you ever been snapped at? And remember that you've been a person who snapped too. We're all doing the best we can. And yes, that sometimes we're resourceful and things slow and sometimes not. So if you want an extraordinary life, you can't have a life filled with joy and gratitude and happiness and fulfillment if everyone has to behave a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way that meets your needs. Because here's the real truth. You usually are really not forgiving yourself. Because the truth of the matter is we don't all live the way we think we should, act the way we should, work out the way we should, treat our kids every moment that we should, have the mental mindset that we should every moment. I don't. Nobody does. And so the ability to just let go, that's all forgiveness is let go and let God, or let go and move on. Let go and let's move to something better. Give someone forgiveness. Give yourself forgiveness. Just let it go. It's a gift you give yourself. It's this capacity to understand that resentment just destroys us. The person you hurt when you don't forgive is you. Mandela himself said, resentment is like drinking poison and then expecting your enemy to die. So could you choose right now to forgive someone for something? Could you just not have to wait for a perfect apology or perfect conditions or them to prove themselves? What if you were just magnanimous? What if the spirit of the holidays is really about that concept of whatever religion or whatever belief you have, that concept of just letting go and loving in spite of whatever behavior we have, because human beings are not their behavior. And instead of perfection, which no human being is, you are forgiving to yourself to say, hey, I learned and I grew. And the people around me are learning and growing. We're all here at Earth School together, figuring this stuff out. So here's my question. What could you let go of right now and free yourself? What wrong, what upset, what phrase, what behavior could you just truly give yourself the gift to free yourself of? And who else could you free? Would you set yourself free? And when would now be a good time to do it? If not in the holidays, then when? Give yourself a gift. Give the gift to someone today. Consciously, radically forgive. And no, you don't have to live in fear that it's going to happen again. We're all growing. We're all expanding. And each day is a new adventure in the exploring of what it means to be human. And the holidays are a time to maybe bring in some of the divine. Blessings to you. I hope this holiday season is touched with so much joy and so much let go that it's the best one of your life.
Okay. So, I mean, I get part of that, and this is something we already started touching on. My point here, brothers and sisters, is that we do have the capacity to forgive. And we talk about a lot of times, if you won't forgive your brothers and sisters, will Allah forgive you? But let me interject in that Allah has put in you the capacity to understand. What's the best way to understand and interpret these things around you? When I say that, I mean, we're not fools. And one of the tools of the hypocrite is forgiveness. I mean, you may not have heard that before, but one of the tools of the hypocrite is forgiveness. That they will give you forgiveness in the expectation, or they will ask for the forgiveness in the expectation that you will overlook certain behavior, that somehow the hurt and pain that you have is less important than what they want. Meaning this, I call these negative forgiveness characteristics, NFCs. If you heard of NFTs, these are NFCs. And this is the fact when people ask for your forgiveness, it fits into their wheelhouse, or their time frame, if you will. It is 100% appropriate for them because it allows them to move on and be able to tell people, like they do with the hypocrites, oh, so-and-so said I'm okay. That somehow your forgiveness condones the behavior. That your forgiveness somehow washes washes away the stain or whatever that behavior was, or cleans the slate. You know, the Roman rule, tabula rasa, was a clean slate, that whole Latin term. And in that space, that people don't learn. You know, I look at my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like everybody else. And I'm like, you know, the forgiveness that I ask for has a metric attached to it. It requires a sense of meritocracy, that the forgiveness has to be based against the behavior that's moving forward. So if I say, hey, you know, I'm going to try to not be so judgmental, I should be able to see that in a certain situation, a certain place where I'm like, you know what, these 3-4 times, I remember how the behavior was before and I was judgmental. Or sometimes I might be quick to speak off the mouth, like somebody says something to me and I don't agree with it, you know, that I don't take the time to find, I want to say, cordial language. You know, I'm not a person that's easily offended, but some people are. And I'm the first one to say that I'm not perfect. And I'm the second one to say I'm not perfect. And I can find you a boatload of people that say Preacher Mars is not perfect. But understand this. Forgiving, or the ability to forgive, is tied to purpose. It must have a purpose. And that purpose is a goal that we work towards. Why are you going to forgive some activity if it doesn't mean that you're going to work towards something? In the clip you just saw, the video that you just saw, the man talked about you got to forgive yourself. Half the time, you know, we forgiving somebody, but we don't forgive ourselves. Like, how do we get in that situation? You began to berate yourself and feel bad at some point in time because you feel like your trust has been breached and you're the problem and you're the reason why the trust was breached. No, you gave willingly and freely of this trust, and that somebody else breaches does not mean that you carry the sins of both parties. The breach and the person that carried the breach, you can't do that. That's why I say you gotta have that cosign. You need 3 signatures on that letter of forgiveness. That's the person who committed the act, you as a forgiver, but the mediator. That is the key. That needs to have that signature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's where you're gonna go in the first place. Because literally, the whole idea of let God is, you can't look to human beings at some time to correct themselves. You can't look to flawed individuals to correct themselves, at least not immediately. There are people, let me say this very carefully, there are people that can turn it around. There are people that can flip their behavior. But just as many people like that, there are a bunch of people that cannot do it. And you have to be wary of that. And you have to also be protective of yourself and your family. Now, this is probably not the talk you want to hear about. Are you ready to forgive? But it's a real talk. Many of us are walking around these communities. Inside, we are broken and bent. Inside, we are dysfunctional, spiritually awkward, because we don't feel like we can go out and trust people again. You see it in relationships, you see it in business, you see it in religious communities, that somehow we don't feel like we can go out and one is going to equal two, that we can't find joy and harmony in existing because of something that happened down the way, Now, let me back up. I'm not belittling those things. We have serious things, all kind of trauma that happen. And I don't have to go through the list of trauma. It's all kinds of trauma that we are dealing with. We're constantly bombarded with other people's trauma. Forget your own trauma. You got other people's trauma. You turn on CNN, you're seeing nothing but trauma. You turn on Fox, nothing but trauma. What are the big selling shows on TV? They deal with trauma. But you know what they don't deal with? Forgiveness. They don't deal with forgiveness because they're only looking at 2 signatures on that paper. They don't understand what that third one is. You know what the third one is. So what I would say, brothers and sisters, as we begin to wrap up, is forgiveness is a good thing. It is a divine act, but it's not your divine act. It's a divine act working through you. And be careful about how you give out forgiveness. Don't put it out there with expectations that the person you're forgiving is going to somehow turn around. We can have hope. We can make dua for them. We have hope. But understand why you're doing it. Are you doing it for the pleasure of you? Or are you doing it for the pleasure of your maker? If you're doing it for the pleasure of your maker, you're going to be all right. If you're doing it for you and you want something and that forgiveness becomes very, very transactional, it doesn't work, brothers and sisters, because it only has 2 signatures on there. I'm telling you what the third one needs to be. That third one is like the bank going, you know what, you paid this off. Let's move on. Think about that. So as we wrap up, I just want to say a few things. I want to give a shout out, of course, to our consultant producer, Sister Satana Whitfield, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, of which this show does not happen the way it happens. But I want to make sure that as we get into this space, the week of forgiveness, the 10 days of forgiveness, that we find ourselves intellectually and emotionally revisiting how we forgive people. You know, I'm not saying forget, that's called amnesia. I'm talking about reasonably understanding emotionally and spiritually how we forgive people, because sometimes how we give forgiveness can be problematic in and of itself. Can you give it with no expectation? Right? It's sort of like years ago, I was outside a comedy club in Milwaukee, and a guy came up and he gave a sad story. Me and my wife and my kids in the car, we ain't got no gas, and the guys and I pulled up some money and gave it to him. And about 2 hours later, while we were still out there running our miles, the guy came up, same guy, and gave the same story. We're like, hey man, you don't remember us? He said, oh yeah, he walked off. And one of the guys was like, yo, let's go get our money. And I said, stop, man. I said, we gave that money out of space, and all we want now is we want a retribution from the man. He doesn't have money, so that's not our space. You know, we wanted him to say sorry to us, to seek out forgiveness. I said, no. I said, when we gave him the money, we left it at that space. Now, I wasn't with a group of Muslims. They were like, preach, you crazy. I said, no, trust me, man. I gave it, and I stopped thinking about it. I said, because he reappeared, it became an issue. I said, but I treated like he just reappeared, like he needed more money. I said, think about that. So I'm on the wrap up. You guys have been amazing. I'm going to get out of here. God bless you. And I will see you tomorrow. On the other side, shout out to Iftar, the Chappelle Iftar. And we're going to make sure everybody has a good time. And shout out, of course, University of Cincinnati, MSA. All right. I am out. My name is Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Remember, ask yourself